Yeah. So maybe a little bit about myself. I'm 47 years old. I live in Germany. I have a background in like marathon running. So I did that for like 10 years or so before I started triathlon. However, as many like road runners, I was constantly injured. So eventually I was looking for like some alternatives. Like for the time when I was injured, I remember that I went to the pool for the first time in like, I don't know, 30 years or so, when I had a knee injury because I felt like I needed to do something and it was summer. So I went to the pool and I did like one lap and I said like, oh, okay, so now let's think about triathlon. Um, and then my partner actually gave me a couple of books for my birthday, and I got interested, but I saw that it's just relatively complicated well, if you're sort of on your own. And what happened then is that my running club actually started a triathlon partition, basically. And this was thought for people who just wanted to get into the sport. So we had one person who has a lot of experience with triathlons, and so he decided to like be open for like beginners. And so I said, okay, so great, this is my chance. And so in 2019, I actually started with sprint triathlons, and then I sort of worked my way up to like the 70.3 distance, and then eventually this year to like the full Ironman distance. Yeah.
Okay, so in 6 years from sprints to full Ironman.
Yeah.
And full Ironman was always a goal for you. So, like, you were doing triathlon just to be able to get there, right?
I had it in my mind because even with running, I'm actually better at the longer distances for some reason because I'm not so fast for
Yeah.
my anatomy and whatever. But I can go relatively fast for a long time, which is why I eventually ended up with marathon running and not like 10Ks or a half marathon. And when I started in triathlon, I soon had the idea that this might be the same thing. And also my coach, because I'm working with a coach for like running and biking. And he also said, well, Isabel, you might eventually think about going really long distance because I think that fits your athlete profile much better. And I was like, okay, so let's give it a try. And then I had it in my mind because when I was in middle school back in Germany, like in the early 90s, we had a sports teacher who was one of the first German athletes actually competing in Hawaii. And it was big in the local newspaper. And I was like totally impressed because I was like, boy, how can you actually go that far? And now, just like 30, 35 years later, here I am. So apparently it's doable. Yeah.
Great. So, and 2025 is the year of your first
Yep.
Ironman, and right away the second. So, I think the time difference between your first and the second was like a few weeks, right?
7 weeks. Yeah.
7 weeks. Okay. Was it like difficult to do the first one and then in a relatively short time period, the second one?
Physically, it wasn't so hard actually because like when you do a full Ironman, you're mostly going like zone two. I know that sounds weird, but actually I found it less hard than doing like a fast marathon. So I have a marathon PB of 3 hours, 32 minutes, and I felt way more exhausted after that. And it took me like 2 weeks to fully recover. Whereas with the Ironman, I was like not feeling so bad right after, and like just a couple of days afterwards, I was just able to like get back into training. So that wasn't so hard. It was more like on the mental part because I did my first Ironman back in August this year, and this was already pretty late in the triathlon season, like for Middle Europe. And so all my friends were already like in their recom phase, in their off season, and I was the only one who just had to train, and it was just hard to find people to like join me for a long bike ride or for a swim because everybody was like, oh, we're done. And of course, also, I mean, doing a full Ironman is a big adventure if you have a full-time job like me. And there's always things that you try to push until like after the Ironman, like just some stuff that you have to do, like appointments or just, cleaning your house, whatever it is.
Right.
And so that all had to be pushed again much further, or it just had to be done. And so it was sort of stressful to juggle like all these things that I had postponed in between these two Ironmans. Yeah, that was the hardest part.
Okay.
That's the physical
Great.
part.
these two Ironmans, uh, were they different, very different, completely different, or like how can you compare them?
Yeah, it is very different because I was doing my first Ironman in Copenhagen, Denmark, which is like I don't know, maybe 20, 21, 25 degrees Celsius race roughly. And it's also like a bay swim, like as in like a real bay. So you're sort of swimming in like a lake-like thing. I mean, it's seawater, but it's like just enclosed from the open sea. So that was very different because it feels very safe. And so in Kona, it was like open water, which was like really open water, which is
Mhm.
very difficult for me to grapple mentally because we don't have that in Germany, or at least not a race like that. So, and I did like a test race in the Baltic Sea, but it just doesn't compare. I mean, this is like big waves and so on in
Yeah.
Kona. So that was very different. And of course, also like just the heat, the humidity, so the climate conditions are just very different. Also a little bit the marathon because it was clear like in Copenhagen, we would run 4 loops through the city and there were like people everywhere and you were just basically cheered on by the crowds all the time. And in Kona, we all know that yes, you have this part along Ali Drive where it's like similar, but then once it gets tough, like after the first 12, 15K, you basically go out on the Queen K highway and there's like no one. I mean, of course, there's everybody else who's racing, but there's like no spectators. And so that's mentally always way more challenging. Yeah.
Cool. And in terms of your timing, by segments, can you compare? Are you happy with both of them? You happier with one of them more
Yeah.
than with the other? How would
Yeah.
you
I
press
mean,
your, no, your
yeah.
after taste after the marathon?
Yeah.
Uh,
So in Kona, the swim is a non-wetsuit swim, and it was very wavy on that day. And so, since I'm a very weak swimmer, which is why I'm very interested in the MySwimEdge technology, I had a hard time just to orient myself in like all these waves and so on. And so the swimming in Kona was much harder, and it took me like I think 5 minutes longer. But eventually I was just happy because it didn't feel as long actually, because I found somebody to follow and we were like a small group of women swimming sort of the same pace. And so it was not so hard to actually complete it. You just had to keep going basically. So it was not as hard as I thought it would be, but I was still just slow. Whereas in Copenhagen, it was pretty easy. I was able to draft a lot in Copenhagen because there's always people around you there, and so it still felt easier. Like physically, it was just less demanding. Um, so for the bike, Copenhagen was great for me because it's a little bit hilly and I'm pretty good at hills, and also I can just ride a TT bike. And that was good. So I had a really good bike split there. In Kona, it was just harder because of the wind and of the heat and also the way the aid stations were organized, especially like on the second half when going back, there were like lines in front of the aid stations. So it was just difficult to judge on the moment what to do and how to grab your water and so on. So that was a lot harder. I was a little bit slower, but I was still very happy with the bike split actually in Kona. And for the run, Copenhagen went surprisingly well on the marathon, actually. Whereas in Kona, it was just much slower because of like the stress of the day, the heat. I don't run very well in the heat. And so I basically just kept going. And so at the end of the day, I was like almost 50 minutes slower in Kona than in Copenhagen, but I was still happy with the result because I mean, it was just very close and the conditions were just very different. And so yeah, it was good.
okay. Talking about Kona, some big names were not able to finish,
Yeah,
the leaders.
yeah,
And of course, they were, racing with different speed, with different effort, but at the same time, for any Ironman or Iron Woman, for people who doing the Ironman, they always assess the speed, the effort, how much is left. Why do you think you were able to finish, and some people were not able. So,
Yeah.
like, could they slow down just enough to to get to the point where they can pick up the speed or just finish?
So I have thought about that for quite a bit because the two women like in the front, they were also experienced Kona veterans, right? I mean, Taylor Knibb had done it one time, Lucy Charles had done it several times. However, I think that was actually their problem, quote unquote, because when I finished it, I was like, okay, so this was tough, but apparently this is what it's supposed to be. And only like the day after, I heard that this was like a particularly tough day. And I think those who finished Kona before had somehow totally underestimated that. And they thought, okay, so let's go, let's go, let's go. I know the race. But apparently they just didn't because of the conditions on the day. Whereas, for example, Solveig Löfthus, who won the race, she just basically did her own race. She did everything right. She just looked at her values. She didn't overpace it. And so she secured the win. And I think that was the difference. Yeah.
Okay. And did you see many people coming off not finishing
Um,
the
Not so much on the bike, but for example, during the run, especially in the energy lab,
yeah.
even though when I came in, it was started already to get dark and it wasn't that hot anymore, but you could really see that this is like the mental make or break of this race because it's like it's curvy and it's like just going up and down and everything. And you know that once you finish that, you still got quite a stretch. And so I saw many people just being stuck in the energy lab, sort of like just being by the side of the road or just camping out at the aid stations. So this is what I saw. Yeah, yeah,
Okay. Cool. So you are training with a coach.
yeah.
Okay, and this coach is for like both swimming, bike, and running.
I have two coaches actually. So I have one for biking and running and one for swimming. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So did you have a plan or like plans for Copenhagen and Kona? What is the plan? Is it like very, minute by minute or like kilometer by kilometer, or is like an average you have like guidance as far as your heart rate or whatever?
So it's hard to say because like in the race, you don't really see much. Like this is the one thing that I found irritating when I started, especially like the long course races, that you don't really have a good feeling of how you're doing during the race because you can't see your numbers. I mean, of course you can look at your watch, but it takes an extra second to just turn around your wrist and do what you have to do. And so at the end of the day, you have to swim by feel a lot, especially with the distance. And since for me, since I don't have any background in swimming like at all, the main goal was to really keep slow and steady and not get irritated if you swallow water and just keep going basically, and try to swim smart, like really do a good sighting, not swim too far away from the boys, find somebody to swim behind. And this was basically the game plan, like both times, and that worked quite well, I would
Okay,
say.
good, 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 good,
Yeah.
good. Okay, I talked to a lot of triathletes, and some people, both amateurs and professionals, and some people say, "Hey, swimming in triathlon is very important because you need to be in the first pack and like whatever." Some people say, "Hey, we hate swimming for a number of reasons. We just survive, barely survive to get on the bike and enjoy the views and whatever." What's your relate like how where are you on swimming?
For me, the swim was really always the hardest part. But basically because of this misconception, because when I started going for the longer distances, people told me, well, if you just go to the pool more, it'll come easily. It's just a question of practice. And I was like, okay, so let's do it. And then I had this really big disappointment when I realized just swimming more, it doesn't cut it, basically.
Hmm.
Maybe for some people, but for a lot of people, that's just not the point because if your technique is not right, you can swim all you want and you will never get better, or at least not substantially. I mean, maybe a little bit of endurance, but not a lot of speed, to be honest. And so for me, this was difficult. And I remember when I went into the prep for Copenhagen, when I started, I wasn't even sure that I would make the cutoff. So the cutoff is 2 hours, 20 minutes for the 3.8K, which sounds a long time.
Right.
Technically, it is, but you know how it is. I mean, I remember watching the Challenge Roth race, which was like 1.5 months before. And I saw actually many people not making the cutoff because surprisingly, it turned out to be like a non-wetsuit swim, and people were just swimming like this, so as you could see from their Strava. And I had all these negative thoughts in my head, like, oh God, if that happens to me, I will not make the cutoff. So I was very nervous going into the swim. I mean, technically, I like swimming because when I was a child, my parents took me to the pool when I was like 3 years old, and I could actually like swim breaststroke when I was 3.5, 4 years old, which is pretty early for Germany because we're not, I mean, we're not Australia, right? So
Yeah.
where everybody pops into the ocean when they can't even walk. And so for Germany, that was early, and I always liked swimming. I mean, I didn't really do it competitively, and so I had this misconception in my head that yeah, this is triathlon, we swim, okay, swimming is great. But then I realized, okay, that's a huge difference between swimming recreationally because you like the water and really putting some speed on, and that's where I found like a where I had like a really tough time. Yeah.
Okay, and when you say that you need to have a good technique for swimming and like not just, but it looks like all the people who swim, they constantly think about the technique. They watch the videos, they have their watches, they do some exercises and stuff like that. So you think that they're not doing enough, not working enough on the technique? Or in what respects they can improve their technique? What's lacking in their
Yeah,
technique work?
yeah. So I think there's several aspects to it. So one is the water is just a totally different medium. So even if I'm like if I'm in my sitting room and I'm just trying to like, try some movements with the arms, like to catch the pull. And once I go, and then I think, okay, so now I figured it out, and then I go to the pool, and then it's just totally different with the resistance of the water. And also, it's like actually connecting the movements, which is very, very hard.
Hmm.
Especially the point is it's just really hard to get direct feedback, because if you're looking at your watch afterwards, the watch doesn't tell you that much because you have to like manually click the buttons and so on, and even stuff like the stroke rate and the DPS, it's just gives you like this overall picture, but you don't know what's going on like really. And so it's just quite hard to translate what you learned like with your brain
Yeah.
into the actual movement, and doing it correctly because you never know what you're really doing. And also with video analysis, video analysis is a great tool, but I think many triathletes and also swimmers have the same problem. Like in many public pools, you are just not allowed to take videos. So either you have to wait until everybody's out and then sneak in like 5 minutes and find somebody who actually holds the camera, and you cannot do that every day. So it's really hard to get like consistent feedback on your technique, especially if you have like intuitively not the right way of doing this. So in my triathlon club, I saw some people hopping into the pool with like zero swimming background, and like within 6 months or so, they could do like 1,000 meter freestyle in like 20 minutes.
Hmm.
But many people who just cannot. So I spoke to some women in Kona, which were in my group, and I was like all the way in the back, and I was like worrying. And they said, well, we are worrying too because we have been at it for so long and we're still not really fast.
Yeah.
And so I think this shows that there's a lack of clarity for some people who just cannot connect the dots like me. So because like when I'm in the water, I just have no clue what I'm doing basically. So I do something and I hope it's right, but it's just hard to judge like was it really right? And then you have to go back to video analysis or to yeah, just look at your watch. And yeah, so I found it very hard to translate all this knowledge that's out there in forms of videos and podcasts and whatever to like your actual improvement. Yeah.
Okay. But from my understanding, you've used quite a bit of different gadgets.
Yeah. So I use, of course, like all the tools, like the pull buoy and the pedals and everything. And I also did like extensive analysis on the data that came from my watch,
Yeah.
trying to figure out like swolf and stuff like that. And I also bought a pair of form goggles because I figured that if I would see how fast I swim, that might help. But at the end of the day, it didn't really because it's not so suitable for the pool, I think. And the usability is not so great. So I eventually I just put it back into the closet where it's still sitting. Yeah. So
I
that's
understand. And then we got connected, I believe, on LinkedIn because triathlon, and we quite quickly started talking and things like
yeah,
that. And you've tried MySwimEdge,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
With all your experience in different gadgets, can you tell me what was different and whether it
yeah.
helped or didn't help, or whether it's back in the closet, or
No, no,
do you
no.
expect it to use it in
Yeah, yeah.
in the near term?
Well, so I specifically actually started looking for like sensors that would help me improve my swimming, because I always felt that this is really what's missing in the world of swimming because of this issue with like videos being difficult and even like the interpretation of videos. Like if you show the same video to three different coaches, they will come up with three different conclusions, which are maybe not all wrong, but at the same time, it's just hard to say, okay, so what should I focus on? Um, so that was an issue that I was just facing. So so I looked for like gadgets that would give me like more specific data. And what I liked about my Swim Edge is that it's like just one piece, so you don't have to fiddle around with like several pieces of equipment that you also have to charge separately.
Yep.
So I like that. And what I also liked is that it doesn't interfere with like the feeling for your body because you wear it around your hip, and once it's there, you don't feel it like at all. And what you can also do is you can just make a recording, see the analysis, and then think about what you want to change, like for example, head position or like rotation, and then you can just try different things. Like in the same pool session, you can always see how would it change your stroke, how does the curve look like, and this is really very good direct feedback because even with video analysis, you just don't have that. I mean, you send it to the coach, then the coach looks at it like 2 days later and he says, okay, next time you go to the pool, you do this, and then you've already forgotten what you did before, right? So
Right.
and that's the big difference, that you really have this like real time feedback um, on the
Sorry,
pool.
it's not real time. Like, it's like near the real time, but not real time. Yeah, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. I would say it's as close to real time as you can get in swimming,
It's
right?
near real time, definitely, but not real time. And in my view, as a developer, it takes time to think about the data. So, like giving you, real time just wouldn't be a good solution because you just need to think about the data and what it means, and actually why this stroke is better than the other one, left and right, and
Yeah.
best and worst. Yeah. Okay.
But it's still something that you can, like, for example, plan ahead. So if you have this feeling that maybe it's the breathing, you can sort of map out different things that you want to try, like breathing only to one side, breathing to the other side, doing like a 3 breath thing, or like maybe even like a 4 breath thing, or just compare it to doing a couple of strokes, not breathing at all, so that you can see, for example, how that interferes. And I think that is also very valuable, like sort of making an experiment and seeing what happens,
Right.
because that gives you a much better insight than if you would do like 3 4 different videos, because if the head is moving differently, it's always difficult for the person who's assessing the video to see, okay, so what's connected to what somehow, whereas with the MySwimEdge software, you actually see it from the data if something changed.
So the kind of the data itself, the format of the data is sort of quite convenient and easy to understand.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
me, it's great because it's easily to recognize the pattern, like what should be correct and what is not correct. So I think that's very easy to understand. Yeah.
Yeah, but we still understand as developers that some people don't like pure data, and we are moving towards AI
Yeah.
recommendations and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's good that for you the data is actually something that you enjoy and to interpret, to analyze, and stuff like that. So when you didn't do a lot of tests. You did like a few tests,
Yeah.
but your reaction was that your swimming has improved.
Yeah, it has. So I had this big issue with wetsuit swimming, like before Copenhagen. So whatever I did in the pool didn't really translate very well to the open water because I was very nervous, I think. And also I felt that suddenly I was like much slower even than before. And so I figured that, we just needed some emergency fix. And this is how we got in contact basically. And then for the first time, I could see that like it was really an issue with how I moved the left arm versus the right arm because the left arm looked pretty good. I'm a left-handed person, so apparently I have more control on my left arm. But the issue was apparently like the right arm, which had like really weird shapes on the curve. And that was a really good clue because when I was swimming in Copenhagen during the race, we had figured out some corrections for that. And when I was swimming in Copenhagen during the race, I really had this like mental anchor because I could always say, okay, so whatever happens, you just focus on what we discussed for the right arm. You just pull it straight through. You don't do some weird stuff here. You just do the correct movement. And that helped really a lot mentally to have that clarity because if it had been like both arms or something really undefinable, I would probably have, gotten totally into my head, like, oh, it's so far still, and so on. And so even during the race, it helped a lot to have these focus points. Yeah.
Yeah, mental anchor, focus
Yeah.
points, great things. But let me just mention that like MySwimEdge doesn't measure how your arms or palms move. Like you say in the right arm, left arm, but we measure in the whole body speed during the left and right arm stroke. So, but okay, sure, yeah, great. Now, do you use sensors for your running and
Yeah.
biking? Is it like technique or power? What do you do? Like, is it different use compared to
Yeah.
your swimming sensor?
So I actually use it a lot. So for example, for the bike, of course, I use a power meter, but I also look at, for example, the heart rate data and like taking all of that together gives me a good idea of where I'm at. So for example, when I was riding in Kona, I suddenly realized that my heart rate was going through the roof because of the heat, and then I just reduced the power. So I'm very used to looking at values and actually like judging them, and also for training, for example, when I'm seeing like I have this phase where my heart rate is really high, maybe I didn't sleep enough, then it's maybe good to skip a day, have an additional rest day, things like that. So I'm using that a lot. Also for running, I'm using an external heart rate monitor because
Yeah.
I'm doing that a lot, and I also look at like the cadence because that's also for me a sign if my cadence slows down that I'm somehow tired. And because the thing is, if you're doing like a long distance triathlon training, very often your feeling for the body is not really in sync with how your body really is. So that happens both ways. So sometimes I go out of the door and I think like, oh, I'm feeling tired today. And then I do like an interval session running and I'm going like, oh, that's going fine. Or for example, like yesterday, I didn't really feel like swimming, but I went anyways. And then I had a pretty good session. So, but it can also work the other way around. So you are feeling really great and then you go to the track and then you go like, oh, what's going on here? And so it really makes sense to like take into account all the data that is available to you and use that to your advantage to improve technique. For example, also on the bike, cadence is also a thing that I worked on because I like just riding my bike. I was more like, oh, I'm not going very fast, and then like I specifically started working on the cadence, and then it improved a lot actually. And so this is why this type of data is just very helpful for training.
Cool, thank you. So from what I understand, all your other running and biking, sensors and stuff like that are connected.
Yep.
and you use them all the time. MySwimEdge is different in that respect because like you don't use it all the time. You do like tests, and one test is one lap, and then you just you create the mental model and helps you to improve, hopefully. But it's like very different. So do you see this as a drawback? Or maybe I can ask a broader question. What would you, when you use MySwimEdge, what do you think, what you thought might have been improved in the sensor, in the product, in the offering?
It's actually two questions in one.
Yeah, I can,
Well, maybe for the first question, like, does it matter that it's not like that I'm not using it like every time? I think that's totally fine because for me it's more like a performance test actually, but a more lighter performance test because I don't have to stress myself out, which is also a big advantage because for me that was also a big mental barrier when I did the first performance tests in swimming.
Yeah.
And so with MySwimEdge, it's just like an assessment basically. And that's what I like about it because, as I said, you don't have to stress yourself out. You just swim your lap and then afterwards you look at the data and then the data will tell what's going on. That's the
Yep.
end of the story. So and that's good. And also, especially since we're organizing triathlon training in blocks always. So there's always like a period of this and then a period of that. And so it's very good to say, okay, so I will take a measurement at the beginning and then I'll put in some work and then I'll take a measurement at the end. So that's totally fine because that's a good performance monitoring tool, I would say. Um, with regard to what is missing, so the usability is great. It's very easy to use, and also the data, at least for me, was easy to interpret. I think what one could maybe use is a bit of guidance, like what are, let's say, like your first two or three tests. What should you do to get this comparison, like breathe left, breathe right? That
Hmm.
created in the software, like as a clue, like do this first. um, and then, yeah, of course, you can just see how things play out. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, actually, thank you very much. And were like you communicated the results of the test to your coach.
Yeah.
Was it helpful for him or for her? I don't know whether she is a female or
Yeah. Yeah, so he basically said, okay, so now we know that it's actually the right side. So, and then his reaction was, okay, so send me a video that I can see like from the front because
yeah,
he normally, because it was easier for me, I just had somebody like walk alongside the pool and say, okay, so let's just film like from above. But then he specifically said, okay, so apparently there was something that we were missing because you were always doing the videos from the side as opposed
yeah.
to in the water. So try to get somebody. And I think this was a really helpful clue because people tend to do the video the easiest way. And so this was a really good clue because you couldn't really see it that well. I mean, if you knew, you could probably see it also from that video, like from above, but it was much clearer from the underwater video. Yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct because in some cases, like the side video, gives you a lot of information,
Yeah.
like rotation and stuff like that. But if there is a different arm movement, you
Yeah.
can measure it up front. Or if it's like slight changes in the palm direction, so you can you need to do the
Yeah.
upfront videos. And yeah, when you look at the data and the graphs, you sort of understand what to look for
Yeah.
specifically. Cool. Thank you very much. I think I enjoyed discussion. I enjoyed discussing this with you. And to be honest, we do have protocols, but I didn't have a chance to give it to you because I thought, like, I reminded Isabell, why don't we talk before you test? And
Oh yeah. I know.
suddenly Isabell decided to do the test, and you wanted to do it on your own, which is great. And it was a great use case that you didn't need a lot of preparation. And from my side, you just watched a couple of videos and then decided to try it out. That was
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Isabel.
You're welcome.